There was plenty of fanfare and celebration at Blenheim Palace yesterday when the President and First Lady attended a black-tie dinner. But not long after the courtship with British Prime Minister Theresa May finished, an interview President Trump gave to the Sun newspaper went public.
I actually told Theresa May how to do it, but she didn't agree with it. She didn't listen to me.
While still at the NATO summit in Brussels, the president told the UK tabloid that May's Brexit plans could ruin future trade deals with the US.
Well, if they do a deal like that, it will most likely, because we'll be dealing with the European Union instead of dealing with the UK. So it will probably kill the deal.
In response to the interview, May's spokesman said she was looking forward to sitting down with the president to talk him through her negotiating stance. The majority of President Trump's two-day visit is being held away from central London, where protesters are floating the Trump baby, as they call it, over a massive anti-Trump march today.
He is uniquely vulnerable to personal insults. And so we've just got right down on his level to speak to him in a language that he understands.
Yesterday, 1,000 people demonstrated outside the palace while President Trump dined. John Schumo, CBS News.
Soccer jubilation turned to sadness tonight that swept the streets and the towns of England as their beloved team lost to Croatia in the World Cup. It was a mood that is everywhere tonight, and it is a mood that has been felt in Parliament quite a bit lately as British Prime Minister Theresa May battles to save her version of how she sees the Brexit process, the brash British departure from the EU that was steeped in independence and taking back the country. But now she is patching holes in her cabinet as ministers jump ship. And President Trump says he may meet with one of them while he's here, Boris Johnson. Nigel Farage led the movement, and the candidate President Trump at the time cheered him on.
I did.
So he is coming to England. He's going to meet with Theresa May. What do you think he's going to say to her, Nigel?
Donald Trump believes in nation states. Donald Trump believes in sovereignty. Donald Trump cheered Brexit on because he thought it was a return to normality. You know, people want to control their own borders, make their own laws, be a normal nation, not be run by a bunch of bureaucrats based in Brussels. And it isn't just Trump. You know, John Bolton, all those people around Donald Trump believe in this. Now, what Mrs. May has done is, frankly, to behave totally dishonestly with the British public. She told us Brexit means Brexit. We will take back control of our laws, our borders and our money. And the compromise that she put forward at Chequers last week, the PM's country home, frankly was a betrayal of those things. Middle England is in uproar over this. I've never seen, you know, just middle-class conservative people angrier than they are right now with the Prime Minister. And I think in private, Trump's going to say to her, what on earth are you doing? Don't you understand that if you continue down this course, you will destroy the Conservative Party? I
mean, the messages that brought President Trump into the presidency and the Brexit message have so many similarities, as you talked about, and how in the more rural areas of the country and the working class parts of the country, like our western Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin, in Middle England, people are saying that they want to have control of their own country. And you were talking about this earlier in terms of President Trump's vision for kind of remaking and throwing the chessboard up in the air and saying, you know what, your pieces aren't necessarily where they've always been, and you're going to have to get used to that. Do you think that he is working to reorder our alliances with Europe and with the UK?
Well, he's certainly on NATO today. You know, what he said is pretty straightforward, isn't it? Now, previous American presidents have said this, but they've never actually meant it. The point about Trump is when he says something, he does mean it. Yeah, Donald Trump is looking at reshaping the world in many ways, and he's being rather successful at it. I think this visit could turn out for Mrs. May to be very embarrassing indeed, because one of the worst things she's done, she's made a trade deal between the US and the UK now virtually impossible. So her Brexit deal affects not just our democracy, but some American interests as well. It's going to be a very interesting couple of days.
If one big government is bad, imagine how much worse two big governments would be. But that's what people living in Europe have to deal with. Their own nation's bloated government and the supranational government of Europe, now known as the European Union. Bureaucracy times two. How's that for a horror show? Well, actually, you've no idea. It's worse than you think. Believe me, I know, because for 17 years, I've represented South East England as a member of the European Parliament, the EU's legislative body. I was also leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, or UKIP, where I led Britain's effort to leave the European Union. To their everlasting credit, that's just what happened on June 23rd, 2016. The United Kingdom left the European Union. The world knows it as Brexit. Brexit is a statement of national sovereignty. Don't misunderstand me. I like nations. I like borders. I like the people that live within those borders, making their own laws. But I don't like it when faceless bureaucrats make laws for nations they don't even live in. But that's what they do in the European Union. Imagine a Belgian telling a Brit how much he can charge his customers, or the reverse. The EU bureaucrats do this in a myriad of different ways, all day, every day. It is a conspiracy of the elites. Who are those elites? Well, they're a bunch of self-important, overpaid social engineers with useless college degrees who have never done a proper day's work in their lives and have no connection with ordinary, decent people. I'll take the good sense of an Italian farmer or a French baker over the arid intellectualism of an EU bureaucrat any day. And I say these things not as an anti-European. I love Europe. It's a fantastic, exciting, great continent. Different peoples, languages and cultures. But these peoples, with their languages and cultures, have effectively been hijacked by a giant, ever-expanding bureaucracy, the European Union. People will say, but isn't there a parliament? A European Parliament that represents the people of Europe? Well, yes, but this body has got no real power. It can't make its own laws. Rather, the power resides with the European Commission. They're unelected and they can't be removed. And that's how absurd the whole thing is. The European Parliament meets in Brussels. At least that's what I thought when I was elected there. But once a month, do you know what happens? They load the contents of our offices and papers into big plastic trunks, and they put those trunks on lorries, and they drive them nearly 400 miles down Europe's motorways to a French city called Strasbourg, where for 4 days the contents of our office and our papers are put into a new office, and the Parliament then sits there. 12 times a year this back and forth happens, and this from an organisation who say they want to reduce their level of carbon footprint. This from an organisation whose accounts have not been given a clean bill of health by the auditors for the last 20 years. This, a parliament, it's more like a travelling circus. Now, all of Europe knows that it's costing nearly 300 million euros every year to move this back and forth from Brussels to Strasbourg. So why isn't it reformed? Well, the way the EU's been structured, to change that would require changing the treaties. And to change the treaties would need all 28 member governments to agree not to go to Strasbourg 12 times a year. And you know something? The French are never going to agree to that because it's in their economic interests for the travelling circus to go to Strasbourg. And it shows you that a system of lawmaking has been devised where not only can the voters not change anything, but the institutions themselves are pretty much incapable of reform. Unfortunately, this is no laughing matter. Let me give you an example my countrymen know only too well. The United Kingdom is an island. It's surrounded by the sea. And yet, as members of the European Union, we were only allowed to catch 20% of the fish swimming in territorial British waters. What that meant were tens of thousands of jobs lost in Britain's coastal communities as we effectively gave away the ability to look after one of our greatest resources to a bureaucracy based in Brussels. No wonder we left the EU. Again, I have nothing against Europe, quite the opposite. I want good relations between all the European nations. I want prosperous, free and fair trade between those nations. But I'll be damned if I'm going to give up my rights as a British citizen so that some Eurocrat can tell me how to live. I won't do it, and I'm certain that across the continent, ultimately, the French and the Italians won't put up with it either. Good morning. Funny, isn't it? Funny, isn't it? Thank you very much for that very warm welcome. How things have changed.
Eine Sekunde bitte. Just a second, Mr. Farage. Ladies and gentlemen, one major quality of democracy is that you listen to those, even if you don't share their opinion.
Well, thank you, Mr. Schultz. Isn't it funny? You know, when I came here 17 years ago, and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union, you all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you? And the reason you're so upset, the reason you're so angry, has been perfectly clear from all the angry exchanges this morning. You, as a political project, are in denial. You're in denial that your currency is failing. You're in denial. Well, just look at the Mediterranean. No. As a policy to impose poverty on Greece and the rest of the Mediterranean, you've done very well. And you're in denial over Mrs. Merkel's call last year for as many people as possible to cross the Mediterranean into the European Union has led to massive divisions between countries and within countries. But the biggest problem you've got, and the main reason the United Kingdom voted the way that it did, is you have, by stealth, by deception, without ever telling the truth to the British or the rest of the peoples of Europe, you have imposed upon them a political union. You've imposed upon them a political union. And when the people in 2005 in the Netherlands and France voted against that political union, when they rejected the Constitution, you simply ignored them and brought the Lisbon Treaty in through the back door. What happened last Thursday was a remarkable result. It was indeed a seismic result, not just for British politics, for European politics, but perhaps even for global politics too, because what the little people did, what the ordinary people did, what the people who have been oppressed over the last few years and seen their living standards go down, they rejected the multinationals, they rejected the merchant banks, they rejected big politics, and they said, actually, we want our country back. We want our fishing waters back. We want our borders back. We want to be an independent, self-governing, normal nation. And that is what we have done, and that is what must happen. And in doing so, we now offer a beacon of hope to Democrats across the rest of the European continent. I'll make one prediction this morning. The United Kingdom will not be the last member state to leave the European Union. So the question is, what do we do next? Now, it is up to the British government to invoke Article 50. And I have to say that I don't think we should spend too long in doing it. I totally agree, Mr. Juncker, that the British people have voted. We need to make sure that it happens. But what I would like to see is a grown-up and sensible attitude to how we negotiate a different relationship. Now I know that virtually none of you have ever done a proper job in your lives, or worked in business, or worked in trade, or indeed ever created a job. But listen. Just listen.
The fact that you're claiming nobody has done a decent job in their life, you can't really say that. I'm sorry.
No, you're quite right, Mr. Schultz. UKIP used to protest against the establishment, and now the establishment protests against UKIP. So something has happened here. Let us listen to some simple, pragmatic economics. We, between us, between your countries and my country, we do an enormous amount of business in goods and services. That trade is mutually beneficial to both of us. That trade matters. If you were to decide to cut off your noses, to spite your faces, and to reject any idea of a sensible trade deal, the consequences would be far worse for you than it would be for us. And
even no deal is better for the United Kingdom than the current rotten deal that we've got. But if we were to move to a position where tariffs were reintroduced on products like motor cars, then hundreds of thousands of German workers would risk losing their jobs. So why don't we just be pragmatic, sensible, grown-up, realistic, and let's cut between us a sensible tariff-free deal, and thereafter recognise that the United Kingdom will be your friend, that we will trade with you, we will cooperate with you, we will be your best friends in the world. But do that, do it sensibly, and allow us to go off and pursue our global ambitions and future. Thank you. The London stock market's rallying strongly this morning. It is now 12% up since its February lows. Sterling is weak, but then it started declining from July 2014. And the Prime Ministers of Australia and New Zealand are now vying for who can be the first country from outside the EU to do a trade deal with the United Kingdom. Things are looking pretty good. The only upheaval is political upheaval, where we've seen a Prime Minister resign, and indeed the British Commissioner, Lord Hill, resign. They've both done so, I think, for the right reasons. You never know, we may be getting rid of a Labour Party leader as well. But upheavals in politics can actually be a very healthy and a very good thing. And I got into politics because our political class in Britain led us towards a European political project. So if that result last week sweeps a few of them away, so be it. But I am looking forward next year to celebrating our Independence Day on June the 23rd.